Good morning. Good chilly morning to everybody. We're going to get started here. My name is Michael Roventine, Director of SMBMSP. Welcome. Thank you for coming in out of the cold and warming up with us this morning. A couple brief announcements, and then we'll get to our main attraction. There's plenty of bacon and hot cocoa and bagels and coffee back there. So help yourself at any point. You want to get up and get more, that would be great. Our hashtag today, SMBMSP. Give a moment to recognize our annual and in-kind sponsors that make this our programming and our lower ticket prices and everything we do possible. Luther Automotive Dealerships, let's give them a round of applause, please. Absolutely. As well as our in-kind sponsors, Stanley's Northeast Barroom, 514 Studios, now known as New. Skelly Video Productions, Sterling Cross Group, Make It MSP, and Muddy Paws Cheesecake. Give them a round of applause, please, as well. So we thank them for their support. If you would like to see your company name up there, give us a call, mention it to any team member here, and we can give you all the information. We are streaming right now, right, Gabe? Yep, I got a thumbs up. And Molly has the info to share with the rest of the world. All right, we'll be on Facebook and where else are we going to be? Facebook and YouTube? Yep, shortly. So feel free to share that with others. And quick show of hands, who's here for the first time? Excellent. Excellent. Welcome. Hope this is not your last time. We have been doing this, getting people and ideas together over coffee and bacon since 2008, and we hope to do it long into the future. So if you go to smbmsp.org, you can find out about upcoming events. You can sign up for email updates and more. So we hope to see you back here again and would love to know what you think. Next month, right here in this very spot, I should change that to new now. February 22nd, we have social media case studies from 3 local companies. IFT, I'm going to mangle that, West, which is formerly Olson, Top Rank Marketing, and Fast Horse. So 3 really good case studies. It's always a great event. It sells quickly, so get your tickets soon. And you can register right now at smbmsp.org. There'll be links and tweets and such about that as floating about the internet as well. So we hope to see you there. So we're going to bring up our main attraction here. Arik Hanson has decades of experience. You can switch. Decades of experience in marketing. His ACH Communications is the place to go for the very latest on marketing topics and subjects and services. He runs the very popular Talking Points podcast, 10 plus years, I think, is how long that award-winning blog has been in existence. He's also the host of the Talking Points blog.
It's all Talking Points.
Okay, Talking Points blog, and then Talking Points podcast.
You got it.
10-year-old blog, plus 100 plus episodes of the podcast.
Yep, you got it.
All right. He knows his shit. This is why we have him up here every couple years to tell us what is coming next. So please welcome me in joining Arik Hanson to the stage.
Thanks, Michael. Thank you for that warm introduction. How's everyone doing? Warmed up? Kind of. I'm not. I walk by people, construction guys on the way in, and I'm thinking, I'm walking from my car for 5 minutes, and I'm freezing my ass off. These guys are out here for 8 hours a day. Insane. Thanks for coming today. I love seeing all the familiar faces. I love seeing all the new people, too. I'm always amazed when I come to your events, Michael, and you ask that question every time, and like half the hands go up. It's amazing to me. So this has been a great community. I was at the first social media breakfast, so it's a special thing for me. I kind of grew up with this. So it's great to see new people here every time. Thanks for coming. And recruit new people to come every time. That's great. So a little bit more about me. Michael mentioned the broad strokes. Yes, I'm an independent social media marketing consultant. I've been doing that for 9 years. I work largely with big companies like Sleep Number, General Mills, Walgreens, Walmart, Anderson Windows, stuff like that. Before that, I worked for agencies and corporations. Yes, I'm a blogger. Michael was right. I've been doing that for 10 years. I have 1,200 posts out there in the internet ether. I host the Talking Points podcast with my friend Kevin Hunt from General Mills. We've just eclipsed 100 episodes on there. We just secured our first 3 sponsors that we're very excited about. So if you're interested in sponsoring the show, find me afterwards or find me online. And then I also produce a weekly e-newsletter that's full of things like the things we're going to talk about today, as well as jobs. So I encourage you to sign up for that too. I don't sell you on that thing, so it's really just an informational resource. So I tell you all that ladder stuff because, not to pat myself on the back, but more to tell you, to give you I feel like I have a little bit of credibility talking about this stuff. I'm not a trend expert. I'm not Amy Webb, if you know who Amy Webb is in meme circles. Definitely not Amy Webb, but I do get paid to stay on top of all this stuff. So I read all these sources of material every week because I have to talk about it on the podcast, and I have to write about it on my blog, and I have to share it in the e-newsletter. So I carve out time for that stuff every week. So what we're going to talk about today is, trends. And the trend season, as many of you know, starts way back in, I would say October, right? And these kinds of things start flooding your inbox. And my problem with these kinds of posts in general, not all of them, but most of them I would say, is that they're kind of a dime a dozen, right? They're almost like copy and paste. And in fact, since when did financial services firms start giving social media advice? That's what I want to know, right? So not only are we getting the usual copy and paste from social media today, but now we're getting advice from Merrill Lynch. And it's very interesting. And they're all talking about the same stuff, right? So I'm not sure if you guys knew this thing, but this video thing is going to be big this year, right? That'll show up every year, right? Micro-influencers. I don't know how long I've heard about micro-influencers this year, but they're just kind of droning on and on. Chatbots, again, trend 3 years ago. Not a trend in 2019, right? We know those exist. Tell me more. And then the big question, really, based on last week, is what is your golden egg strategy? You laugh. I read a Reagan article that talked about all these companies that tried to connect themselves to this thing. So people are still chasing the shiny objects. So what I want to do today, and what I think I did this kind of similar presentation 2 years ago, so those of you that might have saw it, you'll know kind of where I'm going with this, is I like to give you, I'm going to give you 9 really, 8 in a bonus trend. 9 social media trends that are a little bit more pragmatic, right? And I'm going to back them up with data points. I'm going to back them up with some surveys or research I found online. I'm going to back them up with some examples. So it's primary, secondary research. And then, more importantly, I'm going to give you some thought starters. So the whole idea is to inspire you, but then also give you something to think about when you go back to the ranch this afternoon or tomorrow after you carve out of your ice box. So, sound good? Hopefully I do my job. Trend number 1. I don't feel like I'm going to trip on this paper. Do I need to stand in a certain spot? You okay? Instagram will take over as the new home base for brands from Facebook. So note, I'm not saying Instagram is hot, right? Everyone's about Instagram. Instagram's going to take over as the home base. Big difference. The New York Times is already predicting it, right? They're saying, what if a healthier Facebook is just Instagram? And in this post, what they talk about really is lessons that Facebook can learn from Instagram to make it a better experience. But what they're really saying is Instagram is just the new Facebook, for the matter of speaking. So the numbers tell the story, right? Facebook or Instagram now, over 1 billion users. The only other platform to do that is Facebook. 71% of all US businesses now use Instagram. Instagram is the platform for influencer marketing. Most people know that by now. And the young people are still using it, right? It's a younger platform for the most part. And just look at their rise to 1 billion, right? It's growing fast, right? And it's still growing, right? So its growth curve is kind of where Facebook was 3-4 years ago, for the most part. Meanwhile, over on Facebook, usership is declining. They saw a 5.6 decline in users between 12 and 17, 5.8% decline in users between 18 and 24. The first time Facebook has saw a decrease in users since its inception. That's not good. And overall usage dropped 67 to 62% for Americans 12 years and older. Not good, right? But numbers aside, fine, numbers are dropping, that's not good. What about the anecdotal stuff, right? Anecdotal stuff's even worse, right? How many people have thought about deleting Facebook off their phones in the last year? We work in communications. You guys are thinking about deleting it from your phones. That's terrible, right? multiply that by a really big number. That's how many people are thinking about it. Delete Facebook is very real, right? That's a huge problem. They took a huge beating in the media last year. They're still taking a beating. That just has a way of rolling on itself over time. And Facebook has just lost its cool factor. That's the end story, right? And guess who's gained it, right? So my litmus test on this is I have a 11-year-old and a 14-year-old at home. The 11-year-old and the 14-year-old have never asked me about Facebook. Can I get Facebook, Daddy? Can I get on Facebook? Never, not once. Meanwhile, they're glued to YouTube. They're glued to Instagram. They're begging me for Snapchat, but not once about Facebook. That's a huge problem for Facebook, and they damn well know it right now. So, that's fine, Arik. The numbers paint the story. You're telling me about delete Facebook, but what you said this is going to change for brands, so show me some examples. Let's look at examples. So what I did here is I picked a few brands out. Number one, Adobe, right? Big tech firm, everyone knows who Adobe is. And I averaged out how they did on Facebook, the last 10 posts, and how they did on Instagram. So the big caveat here is I can't see what they're doing if they're boosting anything, right? So I can't see the whole picture. I'm going to take some educated guess and say they're not boosting on Facebook or Instagram, but that's just my guess. But you can see the difference at the bottom. They're averaging 87 engagements per post, almost 12,000 on Instagram. Again, I'm not positive they're not boosting, but my gut tells me they're not. Fine, Adobe, big tech firm. What about like a B2B brand, Arik? Okay, let's look at CBRE, real estate firm. Some of you may not have heard of them before, right? Big B2B brand though. 215 engagements per post on Facebook, a little over 1,400 on Instagram. That's a big number. Closer to home, what about the bullseye? Anyone from Target in the room, by chance? Yes. I mean, look at the numbers. 10 times bigger. 10 times. And I did this math actually earlier last year because I gave a similar presentation in November last year, and the number was like 30 times bigger before holiday. It actually leveled out a little bit. I mean, that's crazy, right? So I showed you the numbers, Instagram going like this, Facebook going like this. Brands are already doing it. Like it's only a matter of time, folks. So for now, I say, look at your own numbers and see how you match up. Do the math just like I did it. Last 10 posts, Facebook, Instagram. How's organic reach doing on both those two? Where are you faring better? Consider experimenting with Instagram ads, right, if you haven't already. Like again, so many people have been so focused on Facebook for so long, now all of a sudden, it's not all of a sudden, but Instagram is taking over, right? I mean, I'm talking to a lot of brands that haven't even thought about Instagram advertising yet, right? Meanwhile, look at these engagement numbers are off the charts. What do you think a little advertising would do, Just like Facebook was 4 or 5 years ago. And then finally, maybe you start, based on what happens in number one, maybe you start thinking about shifting time, right? Because right now, again, everyone's spending the most time on Facebook, really. Facebook ads, Facebook content. Facebook is still kind of the center for, I would say, a decent amount of brands. But again, look at the numbers. The numbers don't lie, right? The anecdotes don't lie. Consider shifting your time. So that's trend number one. My bonus trend is tied to this, which is why I kind of want to mention it at the same time, and that is that Instagram will increasingly become all about stories. And I know this isn't really breaking huge ground here, but I still want to talk this one through. Because again, what I see online is there are brands doing it, but really is a lot of people doing it well? No, not yet. People are still experimenting, right? So again, it's already happening, and with success. So this is, you're going to see this buffer survey come up a lot. I tweeted this yesterday, so some of you may have seen this, but if you haven't, take a look at the survey because they have some great data points in there. And this is one of them, how effective a story's been as part of your strategy in 2018. And you can see, outside of the uncertain one, which I'll get to in a second, what's that, 57% are saying they're either somewhat effective or very effective. Boom, right? And then you got the uncertain people in there. The only reason, my guess, is that they're uncertain is they don't know how to measure it yet. Once they figure that out, and once Instagram guides them a little bit more, they're going to register in those 35 or 25 groups. So people are using it now, and it's already working, or at least they think it's working. Again, consider the numbers, right? By last count, Instagram Stories now has 400 million daily active users. That's more than Reddit, Twitter, and Pinterest. Holy cow. When did that happen, right? If you haven't been paying attention, those are big numbers. Stories have also reportedly increased the time users spend on Instagram, which is now up to 32 minutes a day for those over 25 and 24 minutes a day for those what did I say, 32 minutes a day for those under 25, 24 over 25. So again, they're spending a lot of time there, right? And Instagram continues to invest, right? So they're putting more money into story highlights. The swipe up feature, which has been huge for brands if you want to drive traffic, which it's working for people. Their metrics are going to get better. They're going to come along. They've already got a lot better, I would say, in the last year. So consider that as well. And again, there's opportunity for the year ahead, right? Has your business invested in story ads? 63% say no. That's going to change this year. That's going to change. More people are going to use or start using Instagram as their home base. We talked about that with number one. And then as people start figuring out Instagram, they're going to figure out it's all about stories quickly. In fact, there's a lot of theories about how social is really becoming more about the story than it is about the feed in general. And that'll probably happen, I would say. So, man, killing my teases. The challenges for brands, though. So the reason I think that you're not seeing a lot of brands do this right now is threefold. Number one, it's a staffing and a resource challenge, right? So how many of you work on a social media team with 2 people or fewer? 3 people or fewer, maybe. How about that? Right? How many of you feel like you're kind of taxed, like you're tapped out? Right? Probably everybody, right? Now Stories comes along and says, oh, yeah, here we go. Well, there's this thing called Instagram Stories. It's going to demand a lot of your time and effort. You're going to have to produce things all the time, and it's going to go away in 24 hours. Like, how the hell are we going to do that, right? Like, that's where we're at right now. Is like we built these social media teams over the last few years, and now they're taxed, and now new stuff comes along. We're like, well, shit, how do we do this, right? It's about prioritizing, though. So I think the people will figure it out. Brands will figure it out. They'll prioritize. They'll find time. But right now, we're struggling with that. Number 2, brand governance is a huge issue, right? Because a lot of bigger, mid-sized brands have these very onerous brand governance processes where they have to approve content. It takes forever. Like, you don't have that option with Stories. You got to get it up there. Or at least you got to plan it. And you can't plan it for 2 months. That's a problem. And then finally, engagement looks different on Stories, right? Like, it's not as Greg Swan would say, the success theater of Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn and Twitter, right? If I post something there, I don't see all the engagement like everyone else does. I see nothing if I'm not the account owner. And I don't think brands like that. I think they've gotten accustomed to seeing all of the success theater, and they like seeing how many likes are on a post. And you tell your executives, look at how many engagements this post goes. What are you going to tell them about Instagram Stories, right? You can tell them some of the back end metrics, but they can't see it, right? I think there's a little bit of a difference. So the one brand I think that's doing this really well, and I was trying to think of a really good example, and I can't come up with a better one than the Explore Minnesota folks right in our backyard. These guys have nailed this. And this isn't sexy. It's not super campaigny. It doesn't reek of an advertising firm. Sorry, advertising firm people or agency people. But it's super smart for them, right? Because what's their mission, right, is to get people out to explore Minnesota, right? See more stuff, go to events, all that kind of stuff. So what they'll do with Stories, if you don't follow them already, is they'll send out a story on like a Wednesday. It's usually like midweek somewhere. And it'll have a number of different kind of panes, right? And the first pane will be, see what's happening, right? Here's the coming week, see what's happening, click through. And then the next 4, 5, 6 will be all these different events from across the state, right? And then the last one is swipe up for more, go to their website, read all about it. That's super brilliant, right? And I'm sure I'd be really curious to know how that's working for them, but my guess is working really well. They do it every week. I look at this thing every week. I'm like, holy shit, like there's some events that are close by. I didn't know about those things, Just curating stuff and sending that right to my Instagram feed. Perfect. Great job, Explore Minnesota. I know Caitlin Rick is kind of in charge of this, and she does a great job with this, and they've been on the cutting edge of social for years. So for now, I would say with Stories, really just kind of jump in, experiment, learn, tweak. Like, we're still in experimentation phase, right? Like, that's what I told you at the outset. When I look at brands on there, most of them are still kind of just playing with it. They're just figuring it out, right? So figure it out. Jump in there and experiment. Don't be afraid to, do whatever. But make sure you're tracking results, right? It has those enhanced metrics now. It'll tell you impressions, click forwards, clicks backs, exits, all that kind of stuff. Like, find the metrics that work for you and make sure you're tracking. And then if you're one of those teams, like I mentioned, like everyone raised their hand, that are taxed, right? And you're struggling with how you're going to resource this thing, think about involving other people, right? Could you involve your influencers in this kind of thing? Could you involve your employees as influencers and do like takeovers with them? I mean, you have options. You don't have to create all the content necessarily. You can plan them out too. There's a lot of things you can do with text. I mean, you have options. but involving other people from your kind of your marketing and communications ecosystem, I think would make a lot of sense to get off the dime. Number 2, and this is a big one, this is probably the most controversial one I have in here, is that engagement as a metric, I think, is going to begin to fade. Before you go crazy, because I know this is probably on everyone's list right now as a key metric this year, hear me out. So I got 3 big reasons to why, and then you can call me and tell me that I'm stupid. Number 1, I think, I've thought this for a couple years now, actually. I don't think brands are interested in engagement. I really don't. And case in point, I'll pick on Macy's. And we can pick on Macy's now because they ditched us and they don't live here anymore. So we're going to really pick on Macy's for a second. But Macy's, as you can see, here's a post they had earlier this month. And the headline says, for those who can't read it, put in the work with activewear that works with you. It's got a link to their website. And they're showing, a woman with workout wear or whatever. So they're tackling a pretty controversial topic here, right? So my guess is they're looking for discussion, right? They want engagement here, right? But what do I find if I look through the comment feed? Not much. I see them answering questions about products, very basic questions, right? They're not engaging. What did we all say when we joined social media years ago? We said, we got to join the conversation, right? And it's one of the most annoying things ever. But we got to join the conversation, right? We want engagement. We want to talk to people, right? People are talking about this. They got exactly what they wanted. And here they are sitting on the sidelines being, okay, look at this engagement. This is great. We love this engagement. Meanwhile, here, this is what engagement looks like, brand engagement looks like in 2019, in my opinion. What is this? This is their Twitter feed, right? This is customer service. Customer service 101. And they're doing a great job of it, right? But what is customer service? Customer service is answering pissed off people's tweets, right? Like think of the airlines, right? Like there's no positive stuff in there. And Macy's probably the same way. If I look through these carefully enough, it's customer service 101. So think about how you term engagement. What do you think of when you think of engagement? It's probably not negativity, right? It's positive brand engagement. It's brand love, all that stuff. They're getting it here. It's not necessarily brand love like I love Macy's, but it's a rich, deep discussion about a topic that they must care about. They're talking about it over there. Why aren't they engaging? They're not engaging. They don't care. They care about this, but this is customer service. This isn't even run by the communications team. This is solving problems. Totally different. And it doesn't seem to line up with what people are thinking, too. So this is, again, from the Buffer survey, saying what does meaningful engagement mean to you when measuring the performance of content on social? So again, based on what I just said, look at what they're saying here, right? Number 1 is saying likes, comments, shares. Agree. That's what we're looking for, right? But how many comments did we see on that post? Not too many from Macy's. Interaction with the brand, you could argue that that's customer service. But those other ones, discussion, that's positive engagement. Sentiment, feeling, they're looking for positive sentiment, right? They don't want the negative stuff. That's not lining up for me, right? So brands are saying one thing and doing another thing. Yes, we want positive engagement, but we're not gonna talk to people. We're just gonna do customer service. Well, that's not really engagement, dude. Number 2, I think engagement rates on the biggest social platform are plummeting. And many of you have probably seen this already, but here's the graphic I found that kind of sums up where Facebook engagement has gone in the last, 2 years? Almost 2 years now. And anecdotally, I can tell you with some of the clients I've worked with, we've seen this as well. I'm guessing some of you may have too. So that's not going in a good direction either. And I talked about what's going on Facebook overall at the beginning. Yeah. God, I forgot where I got this from. I could find where I got this from and put it in the deck, though, the final deck. So case in point. I thought I'd give you a couple of case in points here, right? Under Armour. Under Armour, huge brand. Everyone knows Under Armour, huh? They got 10 million fans on Facebook. Here's a post featuring Steph Curry, who, second most popular basketball player on the face of the earth, I would say, behind LeBron James. Certainly this is going to do well, right? 272 engagements. Engagement rate of 0.0000265. That's not good. No CMO is going to look at that and be like, oh boy, look at that engagement rate, 0.0000265. Wow, that's awesome. Okay, fine. Let's look at another one. Let's look at Dunkin'. Surely Dunkin', social media case study du jour for years, must have this figured out, right? 15 million followers on Facebook. They're going to get great engagement, right? 0.0000011. I mean, that's a lot of zeros. And that's no good, yeah.
Isn't this directly correlated to the fact that organic reach is down? So this isn't a true engagement rate because no one's seeing it.
That's way down, though. I mean, zero. Look at where the engagement's at. Where are they posting it? Is my point, right?
Good question, but 15 million people see it.
Sorry. The question was, doesn't this reflect organic engagement rate nosedive, right? Last 5 years now, right? Which is my question. We'll get to that in a little bit, but yes, totally correct. But again though, why measure engagements then, right? It's dead. There's nothing to it. Number 3, engagements are starting to become very fluffy in how people measure them. So not only are we having a hard time defining what engagement is, we're having a hard time defining how to measure it because seemingly a lot of people measure it differently. And I'm not picking on Target here. I'm just using them as an example. I bet you a lot of people are doing it this way. And I'm not saying Target's doing it this way either. I'm just going to use this as an example. So some people would measure engagements by purely likes, comments, shares, right? And as you can see here, they did pretty good on that. 2,800 likes, 400 comments, almost 300 shares. Some people would include this little number in there when they're measuring engagement so well, right? So what does that number look like when you include video views in there? Like it goes from, let's see, I'm not good at math, 3,400 engagements to 380,000 engagements. Which one do you trust, right? Keep in mind, Facebook is measuring video views as what, 3 seconds still? Wow, okay, that's pretty fluffy, right? Now that's starting to feel like an impression almost, right? This is why engagements are dying. And I'm not saying everyone's measuring it this way, but some people are. And some people are measuring it even differently than that. So it's nebulous, it's fluffy, it feels like impressions to me. It feels like impressions have for years, where it's like, well, this is super soft, right? Meanwhile, a lot of brands are leading with engagements, right? Like, well, we got a great engagement rate on this. We got so many engagements. Well, how much do they really matter anymore? So I think for now, evaluate your social KPIs this year for 2019 and think about, do they still make sense? Where does engagement fit on your mix? You're probably still going to measure it. Like I said, it's like impressions now. You're still going to measure it. But are you leading with it? If you are, I don't know. I don't know if that's the right thing to do. I would also probably define engagement more succinctly. Right? Think about how you're talking about it. Is it all about customer service? Are you including those video view metrics? If so, do people know that? Like, really have a discussion about how you're defining engagement. And then finally, and most importantly, think about getting closer to your lead, right? Because that's where you're going to make your money, and that's where you're going to prove more of your value to your leadership. Because all these things I list here at the bottom, you can track now very easily through social media marketing. Actions on site, e-newsletter signups from social, lead form completions. I mean, there's a big list. You can do all that stuff. There's no reason you can't. It's all available to you. And engagements are still something you should probably look at, but it's not the same as it was 3, 4, or 5 years ago. It's just not. So I think that's going to be one you're going to start to see more of. Number 3, private social networking will start to impact your 2019 plans. What do I mean by that? Well, I'm talking about Messenger, chatbots, private groups, stuff like that, right? So, the usage of Messenger, you're probably not surprised by this, is going way up, right? You can see the graphic here from April 2014 to September 2017. Same thing with WhatsApp, right? So the chat apps are ratcheting way up. Huge growth curves on those. And messaging is going to continue to rise, right? So it's not like quite leveling off yet. It's still growing, right? People are still changing their behaviors and how they deal with social media. And at the same time, I'm just going to keep throwing this graphic at you. Public engagement is going down, right? So more people are using these chat apps, more people are conversing privately, and meanwhile, fewer people are engaging on social. So think about, again, I would challenge you to think about the way you use your phone and social media now. Like, how much public stuff are you doing versus how much private stuff are you doing? My guess is probably heavier on the private, if we took a survey. Other signals, Instagram investing much more in their messaging capabilities lately, video chat, poll functionality. They're saying they have, or as of 2 years ago now, 250,000 active users using their direct messaging capabilities. Facebook's been rumored to be testing getting rid of the share button which to me is like, well, again, that plays to my engagement issue or theory. Like, if they're getting rid of the share button, like, just get rid of all of it, right? Like, what's the point, right? That's the holy grail. And anecdotally, I would say private and secret groups seem to gain a lot of traction, I would say, in the last year. I have a couple different clients where we did a lot of research at the front end of our engagement, and one of the places I found a ton of people hanging out in their industries was in these private Facebook groups. A ton. Those can't be the only ones, right? To me, that was like, well, okay, geez, wow, if they're doing it, there's got to be a ton more of these that we can't see. My guess is there is. So all this stuff kind of leads you to believe that we're kind of going this private way kind of with social media. And there's plenty of opportunity too. Has your business used any messaging apps for marketing? Almost 72% of the people are saying no. So it's not something that a lot of people have explored just yet. So you probably or some of you may have played around with things like this. This might be kind of a little bit of the future of social media marketing. It's more of this private things. It's behind a firewall with the groups. It's one-to-one with the chatbot stuff. Things like that might be where it's going. So for now, I would ask yourself to ask a few questions here. I mean, do you start to adjust expectations with your internal stakeholders around engagements, right? Because that's the opposite, just what we talked about a minute ago. That's the opposite of it, right? We're going more towards private, right? Engagements are suffering. They're hard to define. Facebook's going downhill. Maybe this is the time to get ahead of it, folks. Don't wait till 2 years from now where it's like, well, what happened to engagements? I thought we were tracking those. Why did they nosedive? Well, we talked about it 2 years ago. Should I explore the possibility of using more automation to respond to things? Usually I'm not a big fan of that. It just makes it seem more robotic and less human. But there are some ways you can use that automation to kind of speed processes up and do things like that. Have you considered that? And then finally, what do you do about organic social media? We know it's tanking, but there are spots where it still matters, right? So do you care about that? Does it impact your content strategy? Does it impact how much content you produce? Like, what do you think about that? I think that's a fair and really good question to ask yourself in light of all this private social networking that's going on. Number 4, I think there's going to be more focus on some of these overlooked and niche social media sites in lieu of kind of what I'm telling you specifically about Facebook, right? It's Facebook kind of going downhill, people not sure what to do, a lot of people feel unsure of what's going on Twitter, and for a long time, those have been the big two, really, right? Meanwhile, some of these other platforms have really grown and are really rich, vibrant places, right? So you have the big 4, you have Facebook, you have Twitter, you have LinkedIn, you have Instagram. But don't forget about these, right? There's this platform called Quora, I'm sure most of you have heard about. Now has 190 million users. There's 400,000 topics that now exist on Quora. I mean, have you researched topics that would relate to your brand on Quora? Chances are there's something out there, 400,000 of them, right? What about Pinterest? Pinterest, everyone knows about Pinterest, obviously, but they have 250 million users now. And 1 in 2 millennials are using Pinterest every day. Like, everyone wants to reach the millennials, right? Well, half of them are using Pinterest. Jesus, really? And we know Pinterest is a great traffic driver. We know it drives long tail search traffic. I mean, there's lots of reasons to investigate in Pinterest. And then finally, Reddit, the front page of the internet, 300 million users now, right? And people are spending 15 minutes and 47 seconds on Reddit. I mean, Reddit has kind of expanded, right? Because I used to think Reddit was like this, and who knows, you could argue about this, but Reddit's this place where just the tech dudes hang out, right? That's kind of the reputation it has. 300 million tech dudes, really? I don't think so. It's bigger than that, right? But Reddit's a different place, right? So Reddit historically has been a place where brands get torched, right? That's what another thing it's known for, I would say. But look what Xbox is doing. Xbox has it figured out, man. Xbox has it figured out. I know this because my son is 14 years old and he's glued to Fortnite. So I'm all about Xbox right now. And they have it figured out, right? They have this little community. It's branded, right? But they're not in their face. They're not selling anyone anything. If they did, they'd be kicked out post-haste. In fact, they're super smart, right? Because they know everyone got an Xbox for Christmas, right? Not everyone, but a lot of little kids did probably, right? Got newbie questions? Want tips? This thread's for you. You look through here, and again, they're not pushing product. They're not pushing themselves even. A lot of times, they're pushing them to other answers of other Redditors that they had about certain questions, right? They're just acting as a facilitator, right? And that's how brands are winning on Reddit in that way, right? So that is a brilliant execution of it. And of course, there's this network, right? How many people are on Nextdoor? Okay, I thought everyone would raise their hand. So 200,000 active neighborhoods on Nextdoor now, right? More than 17 million recommendations. 90% of U.S. neighborhoods are on Nextdoor. So what reputation does Nextdoor have, would you say? What'd you say, Casey? Old people Twitter? That's pretty close to what I was going to say. I would say it's basically your crazy neighbors, right? The crazy neighbors are on Twitter or on Nextdoor. That's what people would say. That's what my wife would say. But you know what I would say to that? Who do you think's on Facebook? Who do you think's on Twitter, Casey? Right? Hello? So you can't use that anymore. If you're going to use that, you better stop using Facebook tomorrow, because that's your argument. So again, I'm not saying jump all over Nextdoor, obviously, but this is a viable network now. This is a super viable network. And case in point, brands / organizations in this case are figuring it out, right? City of Minneapolis figured it out pretty quickly. All our residents are on here, man. We should be communicating here. And sure enough, it's a little clunky with what they're doing, but they're communicating, they're trying, they're investigating, and they're hardly alone. So I gave a similar presentation to about 200 government communicators a couple months ago, and it went much deeper on this Nextdoor stuff because this is huge for them. And this is it, man. This is a great place for people, for government agencies, nonprofits. It'd be weird if Best Buy hopped in there, I think, but for the right brand or organization, this is a great social network to investigate versus spending all your time on Facebook right now. It's kind of my opinion. So for now, I would say, don't over rely on the big ones. The big ones are a couple of them are kind of downsliding, right? We've talked about that already. Constantly be exploring some of these new networks and try them, right? So I'm using TikTok here as kind of shock factor, but TikTok might make sense for you, right? And if it does, start lip syncing on TikTok. Try it out. Get on Nextdoor. See who's hanging out there. Yes, there's some crazy people there, but it's not all crazy people. I spend time there. I've sold stuff I've at least advertised stuff on Nextdoor before. I've talked to people on Nextdoor before. There's some normal people there. But it bears investigating some of these platforms. Again, Pinterest, for God's sakes, right? I don't know how many brands I've talked to over the years that just weren't even doing anything with Pinterest. It's driving 15% of your traffic to your site. Why are you not doing anything with it? Stop over-relying on the big ones and start investigating some of these smaller ones. Water break. Am I doing my job so far? Kind of. Casey, you approve? Old network. What'd you call Nextdoor? Old people Twitter. I like that. Right. For us old people. Okay. Trend number 5. And this is a good one I personally care about this one a lot, and I've been kind of on this stump for a while. But 2019 may finally be the year of the social CEO, concept that has been talked about for years on social media. And I think finally the stars are aligning a little bit. And here's why. So a Brand Fog survey said that 78% of people prefer to work for a company whose leadership is active on social media. The Trust Barometer from Edelman went on to say that business is more trusted than government. And actually, they came out with a new one just last week, and I think this even went up higher. Business is more trusted than government, and 64% of people believe CEOs should take the lead on change rather than waiting for the government to impose it. So again, people starting to trust businesses more than the government, which, it's not shocking given where we're at right now. But if you go back 15 years ago, that would be pretty shocking, right? Furthermore, 56% have no respect for CEOs who remain silent on important issues. And according to the socialceo.org, only 20% of CEOs have a social network account today. So there's opportunity, right? So a lot of those signals are saying people want to hear from CEOs. People are trusting companies now and trusting CEOs, which is weird to me, having grown up with the opposite. And very few CEOs are using social media. Okay, good formula so far. Meanwhile, there's a few people that are doing this well, right? And this guy, in my opinion, is the case study. So this is Jack Salzwedel, who is the CEO of American Family Insurance in Madison. And he has got it figured out. Now, he has help. We interviewed the guy who helps him down at American Family Insurance on the Talking Points podcast in December. He's got great help, actually. But he's still out there, right? This is our job to help these people, right? And he's still out there. So if you look him up, he's most active on LinkedIn and Twitter, right? And what you'll see when you go out there and look at him is he's not only is he posting thoughtful content, he's actually engaging, real engaging, right? With brokers, with employees, with community members. He's engaged. He's a big, huge, as you can imagine, Bucky fan. So he's engaging with the Bucky people once in a while. He's great. He's absolutely fantastic. He's the case study for CEOs on social media. And he's hardly alone, though. Like there's other ones, right? So 20%, right? So GE, Southwest, Gary Kelly, T-Mobile, Microsoft, Satya Nadella, I'll show you him in a minute. There's a few, right? And they're doing some good things. But it's not just CEOs either. I'm talking about the C-suite. So when we're talking about getting the social CEO involved, we're also talking about the other people that sit on that executive row, right? So Melissa Barr is a good example, the chief strategy officer at Sleep Number, who's a client of mine. She's been pretty active fairly active on LinkedIn for the last couple of years and trying to raise that profile. Dave Schneider, who's a CMO at Red Wing Shoes, you might recognize that name. Very active on Twitter and LinkedIn, I would say. Really the two big ones I would say locally that stand out, but there's not a lot locally if you look around. Trust me, I've looked. So, but when you think about this, what are the benefits for companies? Why are the stars going to align this year, right? So I showed you the survey data. Okay, that kind of paints a picture, but that's not exactly going to get my executive fired up about sticking their neck out there on LinkedIn. I think there's three big ones that come into play here. Number one, it's a better than expected employee communications channel. So here's what I mean by that. So I spent most of my younger years working in like corporate communications roles, right? And the one theme that we would hear from employees all the time is I want to hear more from the CEO, right? So we do the town halls and we hear those and we get executive messages, but for those of you that work for a bigger company or a mid-sized company, when you're getting an executive message in an email format, I mean, how personal is that usually, right? Not very personal. It doesn't feel personal. The town halls feel personal because he or she is right there and they're talking to you. This feels personal because it's from their account. So here's my Jack Salzwedel example, and he talks about this all the time, how he'll talk to employees on LinkedIn and Twitter all the time. They're out there. And he's talking back all the time. And again, there's less clutter. It feels more intimate because it's his channel. So I think my read on this is like, again, if I use corporate communications as an example, when you get an email from your CEO, I think most people probably assume that the corporate communications team wrote that email. I'm not so sure people assume that the corporate communications team writes these things yet, right? Even though they probably do, right? So there's a little more intimacy to it. I think having profiles now, especially on LinkedIn now, absolute table stakes for recruitment marketing. And this is going to ratchet up in the future years where recruitment becomes a big deal. I already have a couple clients where I have one client where I do recruitment marketing via social. That's all I do for them. And this is a huge deal, right? To have executives out on LinkedIn. Why? Because we know when people, think about the way you research a company when you're looking for a job now, right? Okay, when I graduated from college in 1996, you know how I researched companies looking for a job? I went to the Gold Book. For those of you that are old enough to know what that is, the Gold Book. It was an actual book, and it had phone numbers in there, and I would have to call people and talk to them and learn about them. Now, you what do? You look on Glassdoor, right? There's a CEO rating right front and center on Glassdoor, right? Look at reviews. You might go to their Facebook page. You might look them up. You might go to Instagram. You're going to look on LinkedIn. You see who you're connected to. You might look up their executives, right? It all makes a difference. That's recruitment marketing in 2019. That's only going to accelerate, right? Younger people, the olds are going to phase out, man. All the young people. This is just you don't know any different. This is how you do it. It's table stakes. But the executive class, right, is all boomers, right? They don't see it that way. They see it the way I just described it, right? Gold Book, right? That's how I look for a job. That's how people are looking for jobs. They don't barely even know this exists, really, to tell you the truth. It's like, really? People are going to look this stuff up online? Yes. Yes, that's why you need to be there. Because what the executive sees when they see social media right now, and people that have worked with the executives around this, you can tell me if I'm wrong, all they see is risk, right? This is a risk. I'm not going to do it. It's a risk. Why would I do it? I have millions of dollars at stake. I'm not going to risk it, right? We slowly need to flip that thinking, right? This is an opportunity to better the company. There is some risk involved. There's risk involved with everything they do. This is just like anything else. They need to flip their thinking. And then finally, I think these messages also have a chance to humanize the brand a little more. So I use Gary Kelly in this example because I think this is a neat case study around corporate communications is definitely writing these things at Southwest Airlines. So I just talked about before how sometimes I don't think people know the difference. With Gary, there's no doubt in my mind about it. Because if I look what he's doing on Twitter and LinkedIn, and I look what Southwest Airlines is doing, they're just repurposing. But that's fine, right? That's what you want to do, right? That's not going to matter because, again, this feels more human than an email or a post on the intranet or, I mean, it's more human than pretty much everything except for those town halls I mentioned, right? So this is a little bit of why I think it's going to flip this year. I think for now, start with the basics, right? Make sure your executive LinkedIn profiles are up to date and up to snuff. Make sure they have one. I remember researching a firm that I will not name locally, but trust me, it was a Fortune 100 company in the world, or in the US. And I researched their executives. They probably had maybe 10 executives. I think 7 of them didn't even have a LinkedIn profile, including the CEO. You guys, they got to have LinkedIn profiles. This is our jobs, right? So start the convincing process now. Don't try to boil the ocean, though. Like, start with one, right? Most likely you have one person on your executive team that you could probably they probably have an interest in it, or you could probably convince them, whereas maybe the CEO is not ready. Maybe someone else is, though, and that's how you get the CEO involved, right? So don't try to do everything at once. And then finally, make sure your plan, whatever your plan is going into this, is pretty airtight, because the last thing you want to do is go to the CEO or an executive and say, you know what we're going to do? We're going to experiment with LinkedIn. No, we're not going to experiment. This is a plan. Again, they don't like risk. Take the risk out of it, right? Go in there confident. You have a plan. Here's what we're going to do. There's some risk involved. Here's how we're going to address it, and here's how we're going to move forward. Don't position that as an experiment. Trend number 6, and this one is a little bit tied to the former one, but I'm going to broaden it out a little bit, in that employees will start to drive and will drive more engagements than brand channels. Case in point, St. Luke's Health System. I'm not sure where they are even, but St. Luke's, randomly saw this in my LinkedIn feed, and I captured it ASAP because I thought it was interesting. On the left, you can see St. Luke's post, and this is basically the same idea, it's just a different shot, right? Brand post, 79 engagements, and the PR manager, not the CEO, not the CMO, not the chief safety officer, the PR manager has almost 5,000 engagements, right? So I think this is kind of a little bit educated hunch based on some of these factors, right? Brand messages are reshared 24 times more frequently when distributed by employees versus the brand. CEOs, boards of directors, and government officials saw the biggest jumps in trust levels. So again, I'm hinting at that last thing I talked about executives. And again, engagement levels are nosediving, on Facebook at least. Not necessarily nosediving on LinkedIn, the example I gave, but on some networks they are. So another example. Here's Satya Nadella from Microsoft, right? Again, look at Microsoft's, same exact post, by the way. Microsoft's brand post, Microsoft, huge account, right, on Twitter, 205 engagements. Meanwhile, Satya, it's not even close. I mean, that's just crazy. 1.2 million? Granted, he's the CEO. Granted, he's like a famous CEO. There's lots of companies with famous CEOs. How come they're not doing this? Right? He's not the only one. He doesn't have the market cornered on that. What about a more local example? Right? Satya is big time, that's famous. How many CEOs are like that? Let's talk about normal people again, right? Amanda Brinkman, right? I think she's even been on this stage before. Chief Brand Officer at Deluxe, right? So as you know, Amanda is the kind of the front person, I would say, for the small business revolution. So you see her everywhere. So it's no surprise she's on social media about this stuff, right? But I took the last 10 tweets that she had regarding the small business revolution and averaged out to 53 engagements, okay? Pretty good, right? Let's see what else happened here, right? So now, then I look at Cameron Potts, who's kind of their PR leader at Deluxe, a senior vice president of PR, is his title, I think, or something like that. Also involved with small business revolution, also talks about it a lot. His last 10 tweets average out to 22 engagements. Pretty good on Twitter, right? Now let's look at what the brand did. Here's the brand account, right? Both those guys beat him, right? Now, Amanda is supposed to beat him, right? Because she's the front person. But Cam, they don't position Cam that way, necessarily, right? And he's not crushing it, but he's beating it, right? So I thought that was a pretty good example of, like, even in local, more low-key circumstances, like, the employees are outperforming the brands a lot of times. So the most logical platforms for this are going to be the more public-facing ones, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. I think for now, do your research. Like, who are your Cam Potts, right? Amanda Brinkman's probably a bad example because she's not at the C-level, but Cam's not. Who are your mid-level people, or anybody really, who's more active, and then how can you kind of facilitate them and make sure they have the tools they need to share brand messages and drum up that, engagement and that awareness that we're talking about. And then, maybe you take it to the next level. I mean, employee advocacy programs are very hot right now. I mean, if you're already at that spot, why not take it to the next level? That's where it's at right now because of this trend. That's why so many people are interested in this. Now, I'm not advocating for running out and buying dynamic signal or one of these tools right away, because I think the tools have a little work to do because they kind of muck up the system a little bit, in my opinion. But the concept of employee advocacy on social is very strong right now. Like, that is a good concept if you can figure that out. So maybe you start with a lot of times people will start with a small group and they won't use a tool, right? We'll just use email or we'll use Slack or whatever the case is to get the messages out. That might be a good place to start. You don't need to run out and buy one of these tools, contrary to what the tools want you to believe. Trend number 7, influencer marketing finally grows up. I should have put finally in there because I've been waiting for this forever. But it will grow up, right? Because the current state of affairs is really this, right? This is kind of where we're still at. In that it's mostly on Instagram or YouTube, right? It's a lot of food, makeup brands, stuff like that. It's all perfect, right? And in fact, now sometimes people are getting heat for the perfect, right? So the pushback is already kind of starting. So this is an ad from a woman who was engaged by Listerine. This must have been last year. And Listerine took a ton of heat for this because they didn't do the research. If you look at this woman on Instagram and you look her up and you see what she does, she posts stuff like this all the time, right? Like, oh, I'm in my perfect bed with my strawberries. Hello, it's morning time. I just woke up like this, We're used to this, right? But for some reason, Listerine engaged them. And then if you read the post, you can see she's like talking about her perfect day. And then, I rinsed with Listerine. And, it's not exactly a fit, right? So they got a lot of pushback. I'm like, why the heck did you do this? This is stupid, And there was I think I got this from the Drum. There's a Drum article about it, whatever. But this is already happening, right? The pushback's already happening. And influencer marketing really needs to grow up. So here's another example from that Buffer survey saying, how effective would you say your influencer marketing has been for your business? What is that? 68% are saying they're either not sure or they're somewhat effective. I mean, it's not like a ringing endorsement, right? Like, I think people are really unsure of what's going on. 77% really aren't happy. So I see this year, I think influencer marketing will grow up in 3 stages. And some of these things are already happening in small doses, but I think you're going to see it expand in the year ahead. Number 1, I think it's going to grow up from just really focused on Insta and YouTube, which is kind of where we're at right now, to a much more holistic approach. So I think this year and beyond, you're going to see brands start using influencers as speakers on webinars and at trade shows. I think you're going to start using them as guest authors on the corporate blog, which is already happening to an extent. Featured speakers at employee events. I think you're going to start seeing that, believe it or not. I think you're going to start seeing them doing authored posts on LinkedIn, maybe, in certain cases, B2B. I think they could be spokesperson with the media or in TV spots. We're already seeing that a little bit. Casey Neistat was the front person for, Samsung, that commercial that he did? That's already happened. That was happening last year, really. But this is where it's going, right? Like, if brands are going to pay these influencers all this ungodly amount of money, we're going to start to get a little bit more back for it. Because what's happening right now is the inventory is right-sizing, right? Like 3 or 4 years ago, inventory was in the favor of the influencer, right? There wasn't a ton of influencers yet. Brands really wanted to work with influencers. It was cool. So they were kind of over the barrel, right? They're not over the barrel anymore. Like, there's a ton of influencers, right? Because there's different levels, and just because there's more people trying to do it. And I'm going to show you some scary stuff in a minute about that. But this is where it's going, right? A more holistic approach to how you use your influencer rather than just like, we just want 3 Instagram posts from you and then you can go away forever. That's not how it's going to work anymore. I think you're going to see a shift. I'm going to talk about I mocked micro-influencers at the beginning, but now I'm going to come back to it a little bit. From celebrity and macro to, I call them more credible influencers. So I'm not going to say it has to be a micro-influencer. I'm just saying more credible people. I think brands are going to start using people who, for example, people who show up more in your Facebook comments, for example, or LinkedIn, whatever the comment stream may be. Employees, remember that Cam Potts thing? We're employees that see more engagement. Maybe you're going to, start using them in that way. And then finally, maybe it's like people in different geographic areas or with mid-level follower accounts, but with huge engagement numbers. So I think about a woman named Erin Good. Anyone who Erin Good is here? Okay. Are you friends with her? You raise your hand awfully quickly. Sorry, I'm going to put you on the spot. Anyways, Erin Good. I can't believe more people don't know who Erin Good is. Okay. So she is a food influencer, right? She talks about donuts all the time. So that's how I got drawn into her. I love donuts. She talks about donuts. She has fun with it. She's funny. But she's a big influencer in the food space, I would say. She is super engaging. Like, if you, I don't know her. I've never met her. She doesn't know me from Boo. If I direct message her, she will direct message me back in like maybe half an hour. Like, she is super engaging. That is the kind of person you want to work with if you're on the brand side. But Erin is also the kind of person that's not going to show up in these stupid tools that brands are using where they find the influencers, right? You got to dig to find Erin Good. If you're looking for Erin Good in Denver, you're going to have to dig for it. She's not going to just pop up in the first report you see. So you got to really look for that kind of stuff. But I think there's a lot of value in that. And then number 3, I think you're going to see a shift, and again, this one's already happening a little bit too, from more of an episodic use of influencers to a long-term approach. And what I mean here is they're going to broadly engage these influencers in long-term contracts. Again, instead of campaign focus, it's going to be long-term. And they're going to start working really as true partners, I think, long-term partners. So annual contracts will become the norm. Influencers will become more like brand advocates, really, versus assets that are just discarded after a campaign. And I think as a result, I think they're going to start to take on different roles. I think they're going to be spokespeople. I think they're going to show up at employee events. They're going to do media interviews. Like, you fold them in more, make them feel part of the brand. There's a lot more value in that for both sides. The influencers certainly want to do that, right? There's probably more money to be made there. But the brands, it's a better deal for us, right? If we get these people more involved, get them more invested, that's a better deal for us. There's more value there. So I told you we're going to come back to this, but there's a big issue that's going on right now that kind of lingers right below this, and it's this fake SpawnCon thing. And I don't know if anyone's heard about this, but I can't believe I'm saying this out loud, but this is true. Apparently, there's people out there, like this Monica woman, who are faking sponsored content to attract the attention of brands. So it's basically fake it till you make it, right? So maybe I'll include the link to this article when I post this on my blog if you're interested. But there was a whole article written about this in the Atlantic about all these people that are, and they were alluding to the fact that they might be young people, right? But what they're doing makes sense, right? Because they're seeing what these influencers are making now, right? And they're saying, I want some of that. But how do I get there? I got to fake it. So they're faking it until the brand says, oh yeah, you're an influencer. We should hire that person. They're talking about our brand all the time. And faking sponsored content. So they're doing it a little bit to gain curry with brands. They're also doing it to prove credibility, right? They need street cred, and this is how they're doing it. They're faking it. So this is horrifying for brands because it's the Wild West anyway. Now we got to deal with fake sponsored content. Like, how do we figure out what's what, right? And how does a brand go back to? I think this was this Chanel, right? That she was talking about. How does Chanel? What if she had said something that was incorrect, right? And Chanel's like, no, you got to correct that. You got no recourse. You didn't employ this person. You can't tell them what to do. They'll ignore you. I mean, they probably won't because they want to work with you, but they could ignore you. This is horribly scary to brands right now when they're trying to figure this out anyways, and all of a sudden all this fake stuff comes up. Like, it's still a little bit the Wild West, but I do think some of those other things that I talked about are going to make influencer marketing grow up just a little bit. So for now, I think, are you doing all you can to leverage your influencer partnerships, right? Start moving towards that model of using them for more stuff rather than just the basics. Are you looking at all types of influencer too, right? As trust wanes, working with those outside the celebrity influencer bucket, I think makes more sense than anything, right? So again, think about the Erin Goods of the world, right? Like, she's a trusted resource. Why? Because she talks to people. She's not just posting stuff like the strawberry lady and like talking about her perfect day and all that stuff. Like, she's actually talking to people online, like we all used to do on Twitter, for example, you know? Like, some people are still doing that. And are you thinking about influencers as key partners next year? So again, expand your scope. Think about it bigger. Think about annual contracts. Think about how you could really fold them into all this stuff, which means getting more people to the table, right? So like, we work probably in social media, communications, stuff like that. You're going to have to bring the marketing people in. You're going to have to bring the events people in. You're going to have to think about all the tentacles and all the ways they could help you, right? It goes beyond just our function, really. So you're going to have to be a little bit of a community aggregator within your company in that way. Trend number 8, finally. How am I doing on time, Michael? Trend number 8, organic reach. I know we talked a lot about organic reach being dead. And yeah, it kind of is. But in some cases, maybe it isn't, right? So, yep, it's dead. Organic reach rates on Facebook now are right around 1%. I would argue probably well under that. And brand engagement rates down by 50%. But we all know that there's a ton of brands that are out there that still need organic engagement in some way. So how can I get it, right? Where can I get it from? You're probably not going to get it on Facebook necessarily, but where can I get it from? Well, I think one way you can start is by posting less. So I don't know how many audits I did this year, 6 or 7 maybe, and the posting frequency was off the charts. I don't know what people are doing right now with the posting frequency. And this chart highlights the way I've been thinking about it for a long time, and that is the less you post, the higher engagement is. Yet we continue to see people posting, 50 times a month on Facebook. It doesn't make any sense to me. The stats prove it. Anecdotally, if you do your math, it proves it. You don't need to post that much. You just don't. With the way advertising works now, with the way organic engagement rates are working, we just don't need to post that much. Yes, ma'am. This chart, I believe so. I'd have to confirm that. Yeah, I think so. Okay, let's talk about video, right? So there's great ways to get video engagement rates organically, right? And a lot of people say, well, Facebook Live is the place to do it, or Instagram TV, right? That's really hot. A lot of people are talking about that. No. It's LinkedIn. Look at the chart, right? Which platform does your business post the most video content on? What's number 1? Facebook. Not surprisingly, right? So there's a ton of video on Facebook, right? YouTube, number 2. Instagram, 3rd place there. Everyone's posting to those 2 channels on video. Look where LinkedIn's at, 32%, right? So less noise. That's my takeaway here, right? Why would I post on a channel where there's all sorts of noise, which is basically Facebook, versus LinkedIn? And LinkedIn's telling us, take it for what it's worth, that videos are shared 20 times more than other pieces of content on the platform. Makes sense, right? Organic engagement 101 right there. Instagram and Facebook stories, right? We're seeing good engagement rates there so far. They're going to make you pay for ads eventually, right? It's going that way, but still you can get pretty good engagement rates there. I've seen clients have good success with this. This is my clients at Patterson Dental, which will do some Instagram stories at trade shows. Nothing sexy, really bare bones, but they see decent engagement rates here. And think about Facebook stories as well, right? Because again, less clutter. How many people are really doing that right now? Like, here's your chance. If you really need to get organic engagement rates, that might be the place to do it. And then finally, think about, could you curate user-generated content and use it on different platforms? So Microsoft does a good job of this with their Microsoft Life account, where they'll take, employee content and just reshare it on Facebook or on Instagram and see great, above average engagement rates, I would say, for them, is my guess. And again, didn't require a lot of work from you, right? You're just repurposing other content. You don't have to go out and grab new content. Your employees are doing it for you. So for now, I think that first one, really, think about if you're posting too much. Are you posting too much? Can you ratchet that down? You don't need to post 50 times a month anymore. You just don't. I think there's some other things behind that, but that you don't need to do it. Could you identify employee content producers and kind of curate that across platforms? Have you thought about that? That could be a way to get out of the rat race of producing content all the time. Native video on LinkedIn, we talked about that. Have you experimented with that? Again, try these things out, see how it goes. And, could you supplement coverage of live events with stories a little bit? Maybe that's a way into stories, right? You're going to have to be there anyways. You're going to have bodies there probably. You don't have to have a story with 54 panes in it. It can be, 5 to 10. But there could be opportunity there as well. So there's your 9 trends. Did I do my job? You can tell me now. I won't be offended. That took a long time for the yes to come. Jeez. Okay, now I am worried. Maybe I didn't do my job. Questions? I'll run the mic around. How about that, Michael? As long as we don't go by the speakers.
You talked a little bit about fake stuff with fake influencers, but have you dove much into the whole general issue of fake stuff across all platforms? And because I have been, and I'm pretty disturbed by stuff that I find. And also, the algorithms really seem to be different. Like, if you search topically on YouTube for something, it takes a really long time to get quality content. So I do video, but sometimes I don't even want my clients to put their stuff on YouTube necessarily anymore, because they can't control that they come up, number one, unless somebody's searching for their exact name or the name of the company, and also you don't know what other crap you're coming up with I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, but that's not necessarily a new thing, though. I mean, that's been there. I don't know how many brands have, like we have a video on YouTube. I remember years ago the deal was I had a video on YouTube, and then there'd be some like pornographic content on the right side. Why is our stuff by this porn? Like, we need to get rid of the porn. I was like, well, we can't. What do you want me to do about it? It's YouTube. I mean, so you're right. Maybe you don't. If you're uncomfortable with that, maybe you don't post. But I don't see that changing. Like, I think the more stuff people throw out on YouTube, I mean, it is what it is. But the fake follower count is a real deal. Like that, you have to be aware of that. I mean, what did Twitter say recently? What percentage of their accounts were fake? It was high. I forgot what the exact percentage was. I don't want to say anything that's incorrect, but that's kind of why. Right. Exactly. That increases user skepticism. I mean, that's kind of why I don't really advocate for a lot of brands using Twitter in a heavy way right now. It's just not. There's too much fake stuff out there. It's all negative. Like, what good's going to come of that? Instagram's got a similar problem as well. Now, Instagram's different because we're seeing great stuff there. It's a happy place, but they still have a lot of fake accounts. So it'll be interesting to see how they handle that this year because that's an issue for them, I think. And now they got this fake sponsored content thing. Like, they got issues with that kind of stuff for sure. Oh,
Is
Matt.
is Facebook Messenger a way to get around some of the organic reach problems on Facebook?
Yeah, maybe. I'm just surprised more brands haven't experimented with it. I mean, we saw the graphic where it's like not a ton of brands have talked about using messaging platforms. I mean, it's pretty easy to figure out, like I just think we'll see more people try it this year because of that. And to your point about, will people switch between private? I think they will. I think this will be the year it kind of flips. People will say, yeah, we're investing so much money. Because sooner or later, the CMO is going to be like, why are we investing all this money in Facebook, right? When it's not performing. I think this is going to be the year it happens. Then we're going to say, well, what else can we do with Facebook? And you're right. Maybe there'll be some customer service angle to that, but there's an engagement angle to it, right, too, I would think. And, I mean, it depends on the brand. I mean, you guys are in the car selling business. I would think that would be a nice one, right? So I think you're right. I think there will be opportunities there, yeah. Yes, ma'am.
What are your thoughts on and how do you respond to clients who are still focused on fan acquisition and follower count for the purpose of their organic content reach?
Right. Well, so my and I've run up against that plenty too. So you're hardly alone in dealing with that. So feel good about that you're not alone. But I think the comeback to that usually is like the follower counts just don't matter anymore because of advertising. They don't, right? So like tell them that really. Like and maybe you lay out the example. It's like and you can use Facebook, I guess, if you want to. But like Facebook, it doesn't matter if you have 100 fans or if you have 50. I mean, I just showed you Duncan, for God's sakes, 15 million fans, right? And what was the engagement rate, It's all about the advertising, especially on Facebook. I mean, all of them, really, outside of maybe LinkedIn. You have to use the advertising. So it's your door opener for advertising. And then
Has us run fan acquisition campaigns, like ads
Stop.
on Facebook. I know.
Stop. But they're using money, right? So stop and then use the money in different ways, right? So what are their goals? Well, I mean, fan acquisition can't be a goal, right? Engagement, we talked about engagement slipping off, but that could still be a goal. Use it for engagement. Use it for traffic. Use it for leads. Like, they have other opportunities to use it that would be much better. So that's I know it's hard, but like just try to convince them that, like, great, we have money. Let's use it a different way. This is not helping right now. Because the fan thing, 4 or 5 years ago, that's not really the way Facebook works anymore. Yes, ma'am.
Hi. So I work on recruitment marketing for a job placement agency, and I'm looking at number 6, employees will drive more engagement than brand channels, and I'm curious what your thoughts are around encouraging employees to use social media on behalf of our brand.
Tricky because a lot of people have different thoughts on that, right? So, because some people think, well, you're not paying me to do that, right? And they're very protective of what you pay me to do, and that's not my job, all that kind of stuff. Other people love to do it, They love that they work at Target, and they're going to tell everyone they work at Target. So I think you got to be careful with how you come with the messaging on that, because you can't really tell them to do it. You just kind of want to encourage people. That's why I was saying, do the thing to do is really do your research and find out who the people that are already doing it are, and then just get them to do it more. Because it's like, kind of the 80-20 rule, right? You're probably not going to get the 80% to do it. The 20% are already doing it, and they'll do it more if you work with them. But you know, you got to find a way to incent them, for example. Like, they're not going to do it for nothing, really. I mean, they do love working for the company, but they still want to be incented. So you got to think about creative ways to incent them. So I think about one of the clients I did, we had these, for example, we had these mugs that were really cool, and that employees always commented on when we posted them on Facebook. And then we thought, oh, we'll just give those to people when they post stuff. And sure enough, like, that worked like a charm. Like, they loved it, you know? So it doesn't have to be like $1 million. You don't have to give them $1 million or anything. It just needs to be like, find their currency. It's kind of like a little kid. Like, what's the currency? My son's currency is Xbox right now. Like, if we want to impact his behavior, we take away his Xbox, or we take away his time. Like, what's the employee's currency? You could use that to motivate him maybe a little bit. Yeah. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about engaging people with the, now I feel like I can't say engaging, engaging people with the Instagram stories, you know, like the swipe up to learn more. Do you have to have a business account, or do you, like, what are the basics on how that works?
Yeah, you do. But it's not that tough to get. I'm trying to think of what does anyone know what the threshold is for that?
10,000.
It's 10,000, right? Yeah, right. Something like that, yeah. So it's not, I mean, you have to be somewhat large, but yeah, I mean, 10,000, yeah. I know. It doesn't apply to everyone. Yes, sir.
About social CEO.
Yeah.
Let's say, hypothetically, I have a CEO who has 8 connections on LinkedIn, came up through finance,
Yeah.
and so is kind of generally conservative to
Yeah.
begin with,
Yep.
and thinks that LinkedIn is the tool you use when you're looking for a job. How do I convert, say, that hypothetical person?
Hypothetically speaking, what would I say? At first, I think you can easily convince him and show him some stats that LinkedIn is certainly not the place where people go to look for jobs anymore. I mean, it is, but it's so much more than that. Like, LinkedIn is now, I would say, I could probably find a stat for you that shows it's like, they certainly think of themselves more as a publishing platform than a job platform now. No doubt about that. So, I mean, that goes back to my recruitment marketing thing. Like, yeah, people are going there for jobs, but those are going there for information. They're going there to network. They're going there for training. God, there's got to be, I don't know any off the top of my head. There's got to be stats around that. I would use that to convince them of that first, for sure. Any other questions? Red?
It's kind of I don't want to get too much in the detail, but I'm curious what you recommend as far as when you have your influencers, engagers, people that work for you. What tools would you recommend to at least track that and track engagement, what's being said, other than the overall sentiment that's happening, but to get more into detail on conversations that are happening out there?
How are you I mean, you're saying if you employ influencers, how do you track what they're saying about you?
Your own employees, just to make sure they're on brand, on topic, without having to friend each other.
That's tricky. I mean, I think you could just use one of the, you know, I have a few clients that, I mean, they'll just use like Sprinkler that way, or Spreadfast, or whatever the community management tool is. I mean, you can listen. They'll have employee column, you know, like they'll identify people. I mean, we do that for one client where we'll just kind of, over time, identify the employees that are talking about us, and we put them in a column, and then it's not perfect, but over time, you know, it does become kind of perfect. Like, we know who all the people are that are talking about us because they mention us eventually, you know. I think that's probably the best way to do it. I don't know. There's probably not a better way to do it than that. That would probably be the way I would suggest. Yeah. Does that make sense? What do you do now? Okay, so this brings up another good point, though. So I've had this come up a lot lately with clients where they're using less than stellar community management platforms, and I'm not going to name any, but there's a lot of them. Because what's happened the last few years has been all these tech firms have rushed into the space to try to grab this money that was all the money Sprinkler and Spreadfast are getting, basically, right? And there's a bunch of crappy platforms out there that just suck. They're just horrible. But then Sprinkler and Spreadfast are super expensive, right? So like most people can't afford that. And then the middle people say, well, I got to use this crappy platform because it's there and whatever. No, you don't. You don't. Most people don't need it. Like, but my theory is, like, when I come in and look at someone, they're using one of those crappy ones, like, why are you using that? Like, you don't need it. And if the business case is strong enough where you do need to use Sprinkler, pay for it. Like, it's worth it. But if you don't, you know what I mean? I think the gap should be eliminated. And it probably will be, because eventually the industry will just consolidate. But sorry, that was a side rant, but it addresses what you're talking about, kind of. You know, you don't, if it's a crappy thing, so like I have one client that's using this other platform that starts with an A, and it's just garbage. And it's like, stop using it. Like, don't use anything then. You know, just use nothing until you can afford Sprinkler, and then pay for Sprinkler. Like, make the business case. If it takes you a year, it takes you a year. Show them the pain of not using a platform for a year, you know, if you have to. But, oh my God, it's so painful to watch. I sympathize with you for using one of those garbage ones. Yeah.
Hi. So my agency mostly works with small businesses, and so I was just curious on the influencer marketing, if you think that's very beneficial for them, or should they focus kind of more on the employee advocacy?
Good question. I think I wouldn't necessarily assume that influencer marketing won't work with you because of the pay, because there are certain people, for example, if you get down to a certain level, depending on what your business is, that you don't need to pay them. So I'll give you an example. Like, I worked with a client 3 years ago, maybe. I worked with an agency to do this, and the client was the Minnesota Pork Board. And we put on this event. The goal is to try to educate people on how the farmers are farming the pigs, you know, right? Doing it humanely and, you know, all this stuff, right? And they wanted to reach urban foodies. So the idea was, let's have an event at Butcher and the Boar. So let's have an event at a really cool spot that people want to come to. Have you seen their outdoor space, which is amazing? We're going to invite urban foodies, but we're not going to invite like the A-listers. We're going to invite people that are kind of the mushy middle, but are really influential. So think about Aaron Good, probably a little bit below that, but like Aaron Good type person. And we're going to treat them to dinner. And then we're going to talk about, and then we put the farmers at the different tables, and they talked and all that stuff. So I tell you this because we didn't pay any of the influencers. Well, we just asked them. But we offered a really cool experience. So dinner at Butcher and the Boar, we had, you know, I mean, that alone right there, right? We're going to feed you, and it's going to be a free meal, and all, you know, some of these other people you're going to know. So, I mean, think about creative ways to engage the influencers where you don't have to pay them, because you don't always need to pay them, especially at the lower levels. If you approach, you know, Kate Ahrens, yeah, you're going to have to pay Kate Ahrens. You know, she works for Target. Like, that's going to require payment. But the lower level people, the everyday people, they're sometimes, like I said about the trust thing, they're just as influential, if not more sometimes. And the client or your organization is going to be just as happy because there's all these people talking about us online. You know, it's politically it would be a big one too.
We have time for one more.
Casey, I know you have a question. Sure. Nice. I put you on the spot, and you said yes.
So as we see the private messaging becoming more and more important, I think, and you talked about using chatbots, how do you think we can best prepare employees to be advocates in that kind of space, right? How do we train them to be digitally savvy enough that we trust them to, not to be speaking as spokespeople or whatever, but to be in that space, even if they're not customer service or spokespeople or whatever? How do we translate employee advocacy into that private messaging space?
Good question. See, I feel like that's a question that you'd be better answering than I was. But I think that, you know, I think that's a fine line to me. Like, you don't, because the danger, like I worked in PR really before I did all this stuff, and I thought the danger in doing, we did a lot of media training with executives and thought leaders and stuff like that. And the danger with doing the media training sometimes is like, you don't want to script the person because too much, because like, what makes them unique is what makes them unique. And then if you start scripting them too much, then they're going to talk to John, like when you worked on the media side, right? And then they come off as stiff, right? And you're looking for like the good soundbite, and you're looking for the real story. So the same thing kind of with social media, right? You don't want to put too many guardrails on them because then they become robots. And this is my problem with the stupid tools, like not to name any of them, but like the problem is with those things is exactly what you're talking about, right? So the tools, you put content in there, and then the employee grabs the content, and then they put it on LinkedIn, and then they push it out into the universe. And it's like, and then I see all the same content from the same people that work at the company. It's like, okay, that's not helpful. You know, you're not seeing any personality there. I want to see what John thinks about the latest campaign at Best Buy. I want to hear your thoughts on that, right? I don't want to see, you know, like when Jeff, so for example, Jeff Shellman, right? So Jeff Shellman, you work with Jeff Shellman, right, at Best Buy. Like that's a good example. Like sometimes Jeff will talk about that, and he puts his own spin on it, right? Like talks about how he feels about it. He's not pushing the corporate content out there. He's talking about why he worked on it or what it made it special to him or his team or whatever. You know, like that, I think that's what people want to see. They don't want to see templated content on LinkedIn. Like that's just garbage. I mean, that goes back to my point about the LinkedIn being more personal. Like, it is more personal, but if you start doing that, then it kind of takes away from it. I mean, what do you think? I think you can't put too many guardrails on them. You have to put a few, but not a lot, you know?
Yeah, and I think training them in such a way that they know that they can go out there and do that, and that might be giving them a tool, giving them some training, showing them some great examples of doing things. Yeah, I think training is really what we got to do.
Okay.
Arik, I just wanted to ask a quick question about image authenticity. In the news recently, you've got CVS pushing back against airbrushed cosmetic models. You've got unindicted co-conspirator number 1 being modified by his web team with his thigh length and his hand size and his thigh gap. Do you use your current shot of your CEO in wrinkles and warts and all, or are you airbrushing and making people look better than perhaps?
Excellent question. That's an excellent question, because I get that from one particular client where, when this particular person wants to be videoed or photographed, she's extremely picky about the pictures we use because she wants to make sure she's putting her best foot forward, which is fine, right? Like, the executives, I would think, would want that. But we're also in an age of transparency, huge transparency right now, right? And trust. So I think that's a fine line, because I don't think you always want the most polished picture, overly polished. To your point about airbrushing, I mean, I think it's got to be a little bit real. I mean, wrinkles and stuff, maybe, I guess, I don't know, but I think it's got to be a little bit real, because that's kind of the era we're living in. We're not living in the I mean, people are pushing back up against the airbrush era right now. You saw that with the Instagram post. And the CEO, that's the trick with the C-level people, though. Like, that's why it's a great question, because it's all risk to them. And if I'm showing my wrinkles, more risk, right? But that's what people want, you know? Like, it's hard to convince people that that's what they want, is the real human nature of it. And then when they open up, the more real it becomes. I mean, I think back, I keep using this example, but it's a good one. It's the guy, the old CMO at Target, he's now the CEO at H&R Block. Does anyone remember his name? He wrote a post on LinkedIn about their big fallout. They had the financial fallout, and then they lost a lot of employees, right? And he was talking about how they're trying to gain back trust of employees. And he wrote this great post on LinkedIn. It was very honest, right? So this is the texty quote of what you're talking about. And he cut open a vein, basically. It sounded like, right? And people loved it. Like, people loved it. That's what people want. They don't want super pretty airbrush CEOs. They want people to tell the truth. Sometimes it has warts, you know, but I think people look past that. People have short memories. Good question. That's a great question. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Arik, for everything today. Hope we see you all next month on the 22nd. And again, SMBMSP.org for information on all of that. And you can find Arik online to ask him anything you didn't have time for. Have a good day and stay warm out there.
This has been Gabe from Skelly Video Productions. Please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and we will be here streaming the next couple of social media breakfasts. Hope you guys have a great Friday, and we'll have a high-definition link to this on YouTube later today. Have a great Friday. Stay warm, everybody.